So this is going on, you're having a nice second space to work in, you're learning stuff in the big house. How long did this last?
I was there for 5 years.
Okay.
And then I got a call from Wilson asking me if if I would come and work for him and sort of be his manager and agent and the director of that, of the Watermill Center.
Watermill. Now at this point, I guess financially and practically, how large an operation is that?
You mean?
The Watermill.
The annual budget is about it grew over the years. It's about $3.1 million.
And on a given, like pick one of the summers you had there, what would go on?
We had about 80 students from all over the world there, and there were usually about 10 different projects going on, and mostly like 4 projects sort of at the same time, and then he would bring in, or we would bring in sort of Wilson's collaborators, like Isabelle Huppert was there, or Philip Glass, and Lucinda Child sort of come there to do a workshop. And then we also more and more started to encourage the artists that we invited to create their own projects, sort of under the guidance of Wilson, and did like off-site performances, created huge installations on site. We had a lecture program sort of for the whole summer. The last few years we did a very beautiful workshop where we brought together artists and scientists, neuroscientists, to talk about the phenomena of creativity and what it means to have an idea, sort of both, you know, really scientifically and sort of creatively, that changes the perception of our reality. And that resulted actually in a piece that Marina Abramovich did with a whole group of scientists from Columbia University and showed in Moscow just recently.
Okay. So this kind of material, and you're getting, I'm figuring it at one point. When did the idea of remounting Einstein happen? Because this was years before the thought of bringing you to Luminato ever happened.
It was actually, I started working for Wilson, and I had never seen that piece, and I had heard so many stories about it, and I felt all these people told me that they were, you know, at the Metropolitan Opera in 1976, and I thought, like, they must have had like 10 performances of this piece, but it actually was only twice. And, you know, people told me that people were sitting on, you know, they were lying, you know, on the floor at the Met and sitting on the backs of the chairs, and they were smoking hash or whatever. And it was really apparently sort of the first time that downtown art went uptown. And I always say, because Wilson was broke afterwards, you know, downtown art went uptown and then returned back home broke. Yeah. So I really quite almost, I mean, not as selfishly as it sounds, but I was like, you know, I want to remount this because I've never seen it. So it was sort of almost a labor of love only for myself, but of course that's not true. Because so many people had not seen that production, and I felt it was really time, and this is really the last time that Wilson and Glass are going to work on it, that it can be still seen in their lifetime. And I think really Einstein, for someone who loves opera, theater, or you know, any kind of sort of performative arts, it's an experience you really do not want to miss. So I only can encourage everyone here in this room to go and see this performance, because it really is a life changer. And it's, I mean, if you're interested in the visual arts or in sort of painting, and you haven't seen a Picasso or you haven't seen sort of Mona Lisa, you've missed out on something. And so this is coming to Toronto, and it really is a great gift to this town to see this piece. I know that you saw it, and
yeah, I also was impressed at realizing all the other artists who have, I don't want to say borrowed from it, but it's made their work possible. Like a lot of what Robert Wilson does, and that made a lot of what Robert Lepage does possible by stretching the boundaries and making us think differently.
No, I've spoken, I mean, I spoke to Peter Sellers about it some time ago, and he said he went to see every performance at BAM when they revived it in 1986, and he went to the head of BAM because, you know, there were no tickets anymore, and he said, you have to get me in because I need to see this. And he said, well, the only thing you can do is you can stand in the back. So Peter Sellers stood in the back every time for 5 hours to see that show. Andy Warhol apparently was at every show at BAM. He wasn't really sitting so much in the audience all the time because I think he's probably too nervous or hyperactive or whatever. But he loved being in the lobby because all these sort of amazing people that came to see the show were like coming in and out, and he sort of, could be like the monarch of that theater and receive them and everything.
One of the most interesting things about Einstein, and I remember I took a picture of it with my iPhone and sent it to everyone, is there's little notices up saying, there is no intermission. Please feel free to take your own personal intermission whenever you want. And so there was that little insecurity at first at about the 2-hour point, you can see people are starting to cross their legs and fidget a bit and wonder, should they leave? And in fact, I had asked Robert,
Did you?
I know I can't sit for 5 hours.
Yeah.
And he said, we'll leave during one of the knee plays. But he has these little short playlets between the major sequences.
Yeah.
And he said, if you have to go during a knee play.
Yeah.
So I saw one coming, had to go to the bathroom, raced out, and came back before the knee play was over. So it worked out well. But it's you can get, and there were people socializing in the lobby and stuff, but everybody came back.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
They all came back.
Absolutely.
Again, okay, we're bringing you now, bringing the ship home toward Luminato. What was your first awareness of it again? It was even before talking about Wilson, wasn't it?
I was, the first festival happened when I was already in New York, and I had heard about sort of the first program because Linda Brumbach of Pomegranate Arts, who's sort of the producing entity for Einstein on the Beach, she works very closely with Philip Glass, and she produced the Book of Longings. So she told me, we're doing the Book of Longings for this new festival called Luminato. And she said, it's a really amazing festival and blah, blah, blah. So then when I had sort of 2 months into me being with Wilson, and I had known her from my time as being his assistant, because Wilson had done another project with Philip Glass called Monsters of Grace, which nobody really needs to see, and nobody really needs to revive. And I think both of them would agree with that. And so I called her after 2 months. I thought, I have to see Linda, and we always got along very well. And I said to her, Linda, why not, let's revive Einstein on the Beach. I want to revive Einstein on the Beach. So many people haven't seen it. It's such an influential work. I think it'll be really interesting also to see, is it still relevant today?
Right.
Is it still something that is really groundbreaking and that really sort of, activates your senses? Or is it like something like, oh no, this is really, 1970s rubbish or whatever, like a lot of the clothes that are being revived nowadays. And so she was like, at first her reaction was like, I don't want to do this anymore. It's too much of it's too much of an undertaking. It's too big. It costs $2.5 million or whatever to just put the show up, to rehearse it and everything. And because she had tried to put it together again in 2001, and then sort of that fell apart with 9/11, and a lot of the performing arts institutions, lost a lot of their support. So. And then she sort of wanted to let it rest, and I said, okay, well, what if I get you $1.5 million? Can we then start talking? She said, okay, sure, call me back. So I went to Gérard Mortier, who was, to different people, and basically got, commitments for that much money together. And I called her back and I said, guess what, Linda, we're doing Einstein on the Beach. And she was like, okay. and then her, enthusiasm sort of really hit as well. And that was sort of the first time then that I met with Janice and Chris Lorway, my predecessor, about 4 years ago, and talked to them about, doing Luminato, doing Einstein here. And she really quite wonderfully said, well, if a festival like Luminato can support sort of the recreation of such an extraordinary and important cross-disciplinary and really genre-defining work, we are not fulfilling our mission. And also Graham Sheffield actually told me that he told Janice that. So it's a great coincidence and really a great honor for me to, have that piece that I didn't put into the program, but she did, and Chris did, sort of as part of my first season here.
Right. Again, I'm thinking back to the Parsifal you just described, when you did the alternative version. What are some of your other visions along things like that you might want to see here to stretch things beyond just, I'm bringing in shows?
Well, I never really, I think sort of this idea of a presenting and inviting festival is sort of a little bit an idea of the past. I think, especially with the increased mobility of people with the internet, where you can actually, see things with, the Metropolitan Opera being, now in all the movie theaters, which I'm sure is something that's going to grow more and more. This idea of bringing sort of and especially also in a city as multicultural as Toronto is, this idea of bringing sort of productions from around the world to a city is not necessarily a valid one anymore. I think it's to really work with artists and to create new works and to enable artists to work and to give them a platform to work and to bring them together and also make them meet and make really Toronto a home for artists and for creation, and make sort of the citizens of Toronto and hopefully the world come here together and experience this, and make the citizens of Toronto proud of this city that creates this art that might, originate here, and then also travel into the world and sort of bring, the essence of Toronto with it, is really something that interests me much, much, much more. And that's sort of the, kind of work that I've been doing very much at the Opera House in Berlin, and that I really hope to do here as well. And what really attracted me about this festival is that it wants to cover not only like a certain discipline of the arts, which is also, you have theater festivals, or you have this kind of you have a dance festival, but that it really wants to think about all fields of human creativity. And, up to magic, which I think is probably one of the most underrated art forms in the universe, because magicians are true virtuosos. They rehearse, they practice for like 6 or 7 hours a day. A pianist sort of, almost doesn't practice as much. And they also point to a world beyond our reality, which is what a lot of art does as well. But that this is a festival that really wants to embrace all these arts, and I think, even the encounter with scientists and people, great minds of all different kinds, is something that is so wonderful, and that Toronto wants to be the place that enables this exchange and this contact, I think is really quite extraordinary. And what I want to do more and more is, it's almost like with an orchestra, if you put an orchestra into different rooms and you make them play, it sounds like it's going to sound like nothing, or terrible. But you have to bring them together into one room to create beautiful music. So I think, these different disciplines that are very much compartmentalized still today, you have to bring them together in order to create something new and interesting. That's basically what opera was. 400 years ago, opera was an invention in Florence, of some music lovers, some poets, some some historians, etc., that sat around the table and said, something is missing here. We have to create an art form that touches us, that links to us. And they went back to the Greeks and thought, this was what they were doing, but they sort of, combined and fused all the different elements together and brought, all the different disciplines sort of together to create this, what we call opera today. And I think it's about time again that we invent new forms.
Again, you're one man. How are you going to get out to even sense fully the cultural pulse of Toronto, let alone the rest of Canada, and then the world?
Well, I can send you copies of my schedule. It's pretty busy. I've been already to a lot of the restaurants that you recommended, so I'm getting there. Of course, it's always a team effort, and it's you have a team, and we have sort of weekly meetings, and we have sort of this tradition that each sort of person of the programming meeting has to tell us one thing that has impressed them in the last week, whatever they saw, to sort of just get a little bit of these random ideas in, and I do intend to travel, and I am traveling sort of already around Canada, obviously also sort of around the world. But I have a really rich network of people and institutions that I've worked with, so I can really sort of find out very quickly what might be happening in Indonesia, these days or whatever, and then. and nobody can sort of know everything, but I think my senses are pretty open, and I've always really enjoyed to. For me, really, the artist is always first. I really want to see what drives them and what is sort of, what do they want to do, and then maybe help them find more of a clearer direction, because very often also artists are very intimidated by institutions, and they sometimes really sort of think within the guidelines of the institutions. Last week I was at the State of the Arts 2012 summit of the British Council for the Arts, and gave a talk there, and listened to this discussion beforehand, and there was this theater director who said, the artist also has to serve the institution. And I thought, no, that's not true at all. You have to serve the artist and not the other way around. It's for the artist that we work. So I think if you really listen to what the artists want, you actually, get really a broad overview of what is happening in the world today.
Again, one of the dichotomies that things like Luminato has to deal with is in an attempt to get people to come here from around the world, there's always the marquee name bait, who are the names this year. But on the other hand, you want the people who live here to feel there's a sense of indigenous art happening and going on. Are you going to continue to try to balance that, or do you think the idea of the marquee name is not crucial?
I think it really has to be a mixture of so many different things, and especially sort of in a festival. I think what you have to really think about a very broad range. You want to reach a very large audience. You have to sort of make an impact in a city. So I really want to create a huge mixture of different art forms and different artists, and maybe combine the marquee name with sort of the Canadian artist and make them work something together, because it can inform sort of both, and it can sort of create a pull that with their work also get sort of further into the world. I really heavily believe in collaboration and in establishing networks and collaborating with other institutions here in Toronto. I had a wonderful meeting with Tina Rasmussen from Harbourfront, and I think we have a really beautiful idea for a very sort of festival-like kind of marathon project that we can do together that will involve, hopefully, and sort of energize a lot of Canadian talent, and through this kind of marathon format, I think will also be quite interesting for international people to just come and see. So it's the mixture, I think, that you have to put the ingredients, you have to put everything together, but it's the salt that makes the sauce better or whatever, but the one can't live without the other, I think.
And along the idea of mixing things together, on one side, we hear others, this Teutonic artistic director coming who's worked with Robert Wilson, and we immediately get
Teutonic
visions.
with my blonde hair.
Yes, we get visions of, very intellectual in this. But on the other hand, I'm hearing from you about the things that have touched you were Tchaikovsky, Tristan, Pelléas, Chagall. I have the feeling that there is quite a warm beating heart in there. And is that where the art is going to come from?
Even very sentimental, yes.
Yeah. I didn't say sentimental. I said warm beating heart.
No, absolutely. I mean, I really believe, you should never underestimate your audience. I think, it's really, to me, there is no division between high and low art. I think there's only good or bad art, basically. And it's, whatever really profoundly touches you is good. And I really do believe that art and culture is what separates us from the animal world, and it's in the long run really what's going to save us from barbarianism, and it's what artists create really that informs us about our past. I mean, think you have the pyramids in Egypt, you have the Greek tragedies. It's not it's not, you know, the money that they had, or the, you know, sort of the pubs that they had, or the alcohol that they drank, or it's not going to be the cell phones, but it's going to be what hopefully, you know, what artists have created, and that informs us about who we are. And I think culture is something that is defined by all citizens, and it's something that can enrich us all and can really touch us all, especially in today's world where we seem to be so individualized, and where internet is sort of this, I don't know, I'm sometimes, I wonder really what the communists would have done with the internet. I mean, if you think about it, it's kind of the perfect surveillance tool.
Well, that's happening in Canada at the moment too.
Oh, really?
It's a big debate about internet surveillance.
But I mean, imagine if the East Germans, if they had the internet, I mean, they would still be alive. I mean, they would have total control over their people. So I think, you know, the great thing about art, and especially about performance art and music and everything, is that it really creates a human-to-human contact, and that it's something that, you know, touches us. And I'm a really great believer and a great fan of people gathering and coming together and having and sharing this sort of common this experience and this moment. I mean, I think, you know, when you were sitting in Einstein on the beach, you could tell that everyone was sort of so much there, and that there was even a connection with the audience, with the other, between, you know, other members of the audience, because we were all sort of, you know, seeing this incredible piece of work. And I don't think that those were all sort of intellectuals. And apparently in Ann Arbor, they had people traveling from 25 different states to Ann Arbor. Like, people took, you know, their cars and then picked up people on the road or whatever to see this piece. And it wasn't like, you know, highbrow people or whatever, but it was, you know, just people who were ready to open up.
Cool. I think it's about time I should fling it open to questions. Tina, am I correct? Where are you? Okay, good. Because I'm sure people have things they want to ask.
Or not.
Who's first? Questions? Oh, come on, be bold. Okay.
What was the one thing that impressed you the most in the past week?
Well, we have our programming meeting on Monday, so I don't have to. I actually didn't have to. I didn't have to think about that yet. I went to TIFF yesterday to see the movie about Marina Abramović and her documentary, her performance piece at MoMA, and it was really interesting to see sort of that this film brought back the memory of how it was to be sitting with her at MoMA, and once again I shed a tear.
Good. You do cry. That's good.
Yeah, no, I think it actually really took me some time. I was not a big crier when I was a kid. I think I was a very grown-up kid. I didn't really like to mingle with my sort of peers, and I could never smile on a photo too. I was always looking very serious on photos.
Okay.
Now I don't dare to smile because my tooth is chipped. But
see, it all comes out, all the secrets. Another question. Here we go.
I'd like to discuss a little bit about audience. I don't expect artists to perform to audiences, and I like what you say about the involvement and the evolution of art. But sometimes I think in Toronto, performers forget the audience, and I really like the fact that you said never underestimate the audience. I think that's wonderful. So I just want to hear you talk a little bit about the relationship between Luminato and the audience.
I mean, I think what's really great about Luminato too is that it has sort of this idea of accessibility sort of ingrained really in its founding principles, and that you know, has sort of this huge amount also of free programming and wants to, you know, bring in a large audience. And I think, you know, there's more and more, there's definitely a lot of artists who are very interested in having an extremely, you know, direct exchange with their audience. I mean, Marina Abramović, again, is a great example. I think, you know, she said in that movie, well, if I didn't have an audience, why would I perform? You know, and so to create this piece where she's sitting in a chair and the audience can sit across from her, it's like, how much more audience involved sort of can it get? And I mean, there's always the chance when you're doing art that you sort of miss your audience, you know. But I think also, you know, it's a misconception to think that your audience might be more stupid than what you're presenting them. I think it really is also, you know, the way how you present it. And I mean, it can be extremely simple things, you know. I was a few years ago, I was at a performance in a festival in Germany, and the artistic director of the festival sort of came himself and gave an introduction to the piece and the production, you know, before the performance, which is something that I'd never seen. Usually it's sort of, you know, some, you know, assistant or whatever that tells. But here it was the artistic director himself who sort of wanted to connect with the audience and explain, you know, sort of give them a little bit of an introduction into the piece. And that's sort of something, for example, that I want to do, you know, more as well. So there are a lot of different ways, I think, how to really connect with your audience, and maybe also, you know, with a lot of we're also trying to sort of. I think if you go to the theater very often, also you do sort of have the urge to somehow have an exchange maybe afterwards, you know, about what you've seen, etc., etc. So almost all the performances that we do will have some sort of a format afterwards where you can have an exchange with the artist, but where we also bring in other people to sort of look at the work and maybe open up areas of the work that you haven't sort of thought about before. With Einstein, for example, we're going to do a collaboration with the Perimeter Institute, which is a physics, sort of theoretical physics institute in Waterloo, and they're going to send a group of scientists. Finally, I can, you know, speak to the profession that I wanted to become, and they're going to see Einstein on the beach, and then they're going to talk about what they saw afterwards, but from their perspective. So, you know, trying to sort of look at things from many different angles is something that can sort of enrich the experience of the audience as well, and can open new ways of looking at things.
Good. Another question? Yep.
I listened to you talk about your growing up. I'm envious of how much art you actually absorbed. And when I look at myself and many of the people in Toronto, I think we're real novices when it comes to appreciation of art. And I'm wondering what you can do, or what we can do, to move us away from being a novice and more into the emotional appreciation of the art that you're going to be presenting.
I think, you know, what I can do is to offer art that I think can open that access, but I think you have to let go. You have to, and you have to come, and you have to experience it, and I think you have to, you know, really, you have to sort of, I think you have to stop thinking too much, you know, when you experience art, and you have to sort of forget, you have to sort of not try to understand everything immediately. I think that's kind of very important. I think you sort of take the impressions away, and sometimes, you know, it's weeks after where you would think like, oh, this is sort of what they meant. If one tries to understand too fast, and that's why I've never really understood a lot of the, and excuse me for saying that, you know, critics, or I've always, actually I can't say that I haven't understood them. I've always felt really badly for them, because they have to give opinions and they have to have understood something immediately after they've seen it. And I find that very hard. And I find that sort of sometimes that doesn't really help me to to understand a piece of art.
Just, I would
Have
say,
you had that experience
well,
ever? Have you thought
there are
like,
things. No, it's
I
true.
wish I wouldn't have to write about this because maybe actually it could mean sort of, or that 2 weeks after you've written something, you're like, wait a minute, that was actually. Now I understand something much else.
Well, it happens, to be honest, about once in 100 times.
Okay.
That there's something so complex and has so many layers, you either want to go see it again or you wish you could have seen it again. Einstein, for example, I'm thrilled I saw it, and now I have months to think about it, and then I'm going to see it again.
Yeah.
And then write about it.
Yeah.
I mean, I would feel very sorry for anybody who had to go see Einstein on the beach and then write about it
Yes.
on deadline.
Yeah.
You know,
You
especially
can.
if they'd never seen it before.